Men who instinctively take personal responsibility for themselves and their families eventually realize that being atomized, rootless cosmopolitans inhibits their ability to exercise their willpower. Male agency naturally leads into the creation of a patriarchy. Raise your sons to be strong, masculine, and dominant. Raise your daughters to be soft, feminine, and submissive. The bad behavior that we see from women today is simply a rebellion against men's failure to benevolently dominate them. The failure of Western society is a failure to maintain the patriarchy.
Well, we're back and it's time for another Patriarch Hour. We're one day late this week for reasons, but welcome to my co-host, Noah Revoy. How are you, Noah?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Great. Now,
Glad to be here. Got a chance to have a little rest on the weekend, go up and visit another family with a good, strong father and a wonderful mother and their little daughter and spend some time with them. And I think it's very important for men, especially, to spend time with other men. And it's good for the families of good people to get together and have that association.
Absolutely. Yeah, I advocate for that hugely. And I've, in the last year since we moved back to the area that we grew up in, my wife and I, we're back there now after a little adventure living out west. And we've reconnected with some good friends of ours who are in a very similar life situation, husband and wife with multiple kids. And, it's been really great to spend time with them regularly. Basically, she's my wife's bestie and they get along and complement each other really well. And I've gotten closer to him and he's become a good buddy and my weekly gym buddy at my home gym here just in the other room. And he drops in and we pump iron together and just talk about man stuff. And it's so good to, and so important, I think, for men to have that regular, in-person, in real life, FaceTime with other men. And we actually spend, so far in all the sessions that we've spent most of our time discussing the socio-sexual hierarchy. He's been very fascinated by the topic and I've been sharing what I know about it. And, and then we've done case study analyses of people in our lives and sort of figured out where they fit. So that's our topic for tonight. And it's a big and deep topic. But yeah, it's a crucial one, and I think the first iteration of this, I think, really began with the pickup artists, and it was a very basic iteration, but people by now are pretty familiar with the alpha beta dichotomy. What's been let's start with that, historically speaking, and then we'll get into the later iteration and the greater details. But what was your first contact with the alpha beta dichotomy, and what did it mean to you when you first encountered it, Noah?
So I heard about it quite a while ago. I think I was actually a late teen when I started hearing about it. I'm 40 now, so over 20 years ago. And it was being used. Before we say anything about these models, we have to understand that the model is not trying to create something. It's trying to explain something that's already there.
That's right.
And it's impossible to have a model that explains something perfectly, because then you would have a grand theory of the universe and how everything works. And that model would be so complex that you need a model to explain it. And so it would be self-defeating. So necessarily there will be simplifications. And I think there's a point where it's too simplified. And that's what you're talking about. That early model was probably too simplified.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a point where it's too complex. And I think we've hit the right level of complexity with the current iteration of the social sexual hierarchy. So the old one, when I heard about it, was alpha good, beta bad. Alpha, basically alpha is the masculine man. He is the one that takes the lead. He's the one that is that everybody wants to be. And the beta is the sniveling. The beta was often what we're actually calling a gamma now.
That's right.
We'll get into what that means later. But basically, it was a good and a bad, and that dichotomy was too gross. It separated into two big categories. There are different types of good men. They're not all.
It was a functional
the top of the chain.
It was a functional dichotomy if your goal was to get laid. And that's why the
Yes.
pickup artists used it so much, because, alphas got pussy and betas didn't. And that was the basic dichotomy. But if your only goal is to get laid, then you've got problems, buddy, and you need to
Well,
take a
and
close look
even
at your
broader
life.
than that,
Yeah,
and
go
even
on.
broader than that. So the group that I was associating with in my teens and early 20s, it wasn't even about getting laid. The alpha was the one who got his way all the
Right.
time.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess
And
that's the
sometimes more than
socio
one
part.
person gets their, yeah. And if there's, two or three alphas and they're agreeing with each other, they get their way. But what ended up happening was people would try to become alpha just by trying to get their way. So they become stubborn assholes. And they thought that that was alpha. And it was people were looking at the symptom of who you are, trying to imitate that symptom and thinking that then they then became something that they weren't. And
Yeah.
it was, like you said, it had its very narrow use in getting laid or getting your own way in a group. But beyond that, it really wasn't practical. And it actually, supposedly, the alpha beta dichotomy was based on some work with wolves, but actually, two things about that. The guy who originally did that work said that that doesn't really apply to wolves. Probably he changed his mind due to pressure, GSRRMing, which you can see in our previous video. He was pressured into saying that because it said things that were uncomfortable about human nature as well.
Mm.
However, later on, work was done with primates where it is very clear that in a primate group there is a hierarchy, and and it's much more closer to the social sexual hierarchy we're going to discuss today, where you have the alpha, you have the betas, which are as lieutenants, and then there's other groups as well.
Yeah.
And so it was, it has been backed up with some science, and then some of the people that studied it, none of them though applied it the way the pickup artist did. That's not based on science. That's based on practical experience of what they felt was working in their attempts to sleep with women.
Mm. And I think a lot of the problems that people have faced with the early iteration, that sort of low resolution dichotomy of alpha beta, was, as you said, that a lot of men who would have been classed as beta in that dichotomy started to act as though they were started to put on the show of being an alpha. But the problem is, this is not just a socio hierarchy, it's a socio-sexual hierarchy, which means that although it only applies to men, it's really judged largely by women. Women have a natural instinct for this hierarchy. They recognize the men and where they are placed in this hierarchy, and it does have a great deal to do with sexual interest of women and sexual success of men, and sexual not just in terms of getting laid, but in reproductive success, like being able to settle down and have a partner. So women are absolutely part of the hierarchy, at least as external judges. They look at the men in the hierarchy, and their instincts can give us clues as to where we sit on the hierarchy. It's very difficult with this higher resolution iteration, which has been coined by Vox Day. It's very hard to identify accurately where we as individuals sit on the hierarchy. We need the other men around us and the women around us to give us their feedback to help us understand. And there are clues. What these are behavioral categories. They're descriptive categories of male behavior. As you said, they're not designed to give you a goal to move towards necessarily, unless maybe you're a gamma or an omega, and then you really don't want to be those ones. So if you
That's
can, if you
often the goal of what to avoid. It's not it's via negativa.
yeah,
Avoid this rather than via positive. You must become an alpha.
yeah,
I know when I started out, I was raised by my dad was at the top of every hierarchy he was in. I was always the one that people would look to leadership for, to lead them in groups that I was in since I was a child. And so I thought, every man can be a leader. Every man's going to be an alpha, and all
mm,
you have to do is, imitate these things. And I think that really changed when I started meeting some really good men who were not interested in leadership. They wanted a leader they could support rather than being in a leadership position. And they helped me to appreciate and understand the need. Alphas need the hierarchy as well.
yes, yeah,
They're not served by the hierarchy, they all need it.
yeah,
And I do think I will mention something about the women and the judging. Women are very good at judging the hierarchy as a whole, and then they look to the men to see which man was placed on the top.
Well,
They're
that's right.
not as
Yeah.
good at judging the individual man. So they'll look and they'll say, that's a successful hierarchy. That group is successful. And they put that guy at the top. He must be the top man.
And I think
And
this is
then
why
he gets
we
attention.
we often, in the work we're both doing, we advise men to make sure they have good quality men around them, because it's a hugely attractive quality for women if other men who are good quality men trust you, and it also gives women that clear picture of where you fit on the hierarchy. So yeah, without a man to
Yeah,
compare you to, there is no hierarchy. You're just a man alone, and this is we're jumping ahead a little, but this is where gammas really play the game. Gammas are sneaky, sneaky buggers who will use isolation as an advantage, so that women can't properly judge them against the hierarchy, because they can be very good at pretending to be alphas. But once you put them in a group, it's very hard for a gamma to continue to fake his alpha status.
And if you're a man and you are looking for a group, or you're in a group that you don't feel is good enough for you, this is going to be very important that you understand what roles you can play in a group. If you go into a group trying to play a role you're not suited for, you're not going to be accepted in the group.
Mm.
The group will quickly sort you and figure out what place you're in. The other thing too is that if you are an alpha of a group of losers, that's not you. You may be better off leaving and going out and finding a place where you are, you're a beta maybe, but in a group of higher quality men. Being an alpha in a group of losers is like being the largest turd in a pile. It's not really something to be proud of.
Yeah.
And so for men, we need to be proud of the groups we belong to. We need to have nothing to be ashamed of in our groups. And if we're ashamed of the men that we are around, that reflects very badly on us. And we need to either help them be better men, if that's possible. If it's not, find a better group.
Yep, well said. So I'll just give a rundown of this higher resolution iteration of the sociosexual hierarchy, very briefly referring to my thumbnail that I made here. Now, I chose characters from the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, largely because I'm very familiar with it. I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan, and I think it's the epitome of the Batman franchise, but also because across those three movies, Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan did a really good job of demonstrating archetypes, demonstrating these figures in character form. So on the far left, we have Bane, and I've selected him as the alpha. Now, he's not necessarily the easiest choice to put in the alpha box, because he's a villain, and because we don't get to see the good qualities of the alpha in him. But what we do see undeniably is the strength, the physicality, and the leadership, where the men around him absolutely follow him, want to be him, fear him to a certain degree, and he is absolutely ferocious in defending his position at the top of the hill. So he is an alpha, but he's the dark side of the alpha. Then we've got
even in the dark side of the alpha, if you compare how he treated his men to how the Joker treated his men, you're going to see why one is alpha and the other is not.
Yes, absolutely. You could even argue that the Joker didn't have any men, and we'll get across to him in a minute. Although there were certainly, yeah, that's right. Now, next to him we have John Blake, who, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the third of the trilogy, it turns out that he's Robin. He is the perfect Bravo. Now, we're going to use the term Bravo from here on instead of Beta, because of that early iteration and that dichotomy of alpha beta. As you said, it sort of became this alpha good, beta bad, and beta male has become such an insult. But what Vox Day really did in his unpacking of this hierarchy and his coinage of these labels is he identified that the Bravo, the lieutenant, as you put it before, is actually a really, really good position to be in. It's not a bad position at all. You're a trusted right-hand man to the alpha. You're a lieutenant. You're a guy who sticks closely with the strong leader. You're not going to be the strong leader yourself, but you get a lot of the peripheral benefits of being around that strong leader, and there's a trusting, reciprocal relationship with the strong leader. Now, obviously, John Blake is not Bane's Bravo. He's Batman's Bravo, but he's a Bravo nonetheless. And we'll get into the details of each of these as we get further along. Next, we have the Gamma. Now, I've actually totally forgotten the name of this character, but Ben Mendelsohn's character, who is the sniveling, weedy, sleazy, lying, deceiving, arrogant little dickhead who ends up getting his ass kicked. He thinks he's in control, and there's that beautiful scene which has become such a powerful meme of him saying, "But I gave you a small fortune," to Bane, and Bane putting his hand on his shoulder and saying, "Do you feel in control?" And that's a perfect example of the reality of the Gamma versus the Gamma's perception of himself. So the Gamma is a very self-deluded character who almost always thinks he's an alpha, but is not. Again, we'll get into the details of that a bit further along and other examples. Then we've got Jim Gordon.
And the self-delusion. I think the self-delusion is important. I think it's the only character that is deluded out of these in the hierarchy. The others, they more or less know their place.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now Jim Gordon is next in line, and he's a Delta in my estimation, and his Deltas are probably the best example of guys who know their place and who function really well. Deltas are the most voluminous in society, and like any hierarchy, it's like this. You've got very few alphas at the top. You've got more Bravos. A general needs more lieutenants. We need more lieutenants and generals. But then we've got Deltas, and they're the foot soldiers of society. They're the guys who do the grunt work. They do the hard work. They're honest. They're loyal. They just want to be treated with respect. They don't marry the supermodels. They marry the nice girls, and they make families, and there's lots of them. So they're really, really necessary, really valuable guys in society, and you want to have a lot of them in your hierarchy.
I generally find they're actually the most functional men.
Yeah.
They're the men that have the simple, calm, quiet life, and they're happy.
Yes.
A lot of the alphas are very unhappy because of the stress of leadership. Even some of the Bravos are unhappy because they couldn't be the alpha sometimes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stress higher up on that hierarchy. And Delta seems to be a nice in the middle. You've got responsibility. You've got people to help you. If things go bad, you have someone to ask for help. And it's a good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless your wife starts hanging around with alphas, and we'll get to that. And then next in line, we've got, of course, Heath Ledger's Joker, who's an extreme and rare example of an Omega. But Omegas are quite rare, and they're very invisible usually. They don't normally make quite as much of a scene as the Joker did. But when they make a scene, they tend to make a very, very, very bloody scene indeed. Omegas are the guys who don't shower. They don't leave the basement. People generally don't know they exist. They don't get invited to parties. Women are repelled by them if they even notice them at all. They're the guys who are the most dysfunctional in the hierarchy to the point of disappearing. They're the grey men. And when they snap, which happens from time to time, they tend to go ballistic. These are your school shooter types. And these are the guys who are very, very troubled. They're the kind of guys that just want to see the world burn. They can be. Yeah, they can become that. Otherwise, they're guys who just disappear into oblivion, which is preferable to making the world burn. But, if they can move themselves up into the Delta sphere, they'll be much, much happier guys. And then, of course, we have the hero, the Dark Knight of this particular series. Normally, the Alpha is the hero, but in this case, Batman is a Sigma. He's not an Alpha. He plays the Alpha as Bruce Wayne, but as anyone who knows the characters well knows, that Bruce Wayne is the false persona. Bruce Wayne is the Alpha character that he plays, but Batman is who he truly is, and he's a Sigma. He doesn't want to be part of a hierarchy. He wants to stand alone and do his own thing. And in this case, it's defend Gotham City against crime and evil. So Sigmas often appear to be a lot like Alphas, but they're not really into working in teams. They're not really into being part of hierarchies. Generally, they can be, but they prefer to do things their own way and not really have to answer to anybody else. So they tend to exist outside of the hierarchy. They don't play by the rules that others play by. So that's a brief rundown.
I find with the Sigmas a lot of times it's they're willing to take a lot of responsibility
Mm.
for things, but not responsibility for people. And
Yeah,
that's a big difference between them and the alphas. They both can have very high levels of responsibility, but one of them it's a very social responsibility, and the other it's very individual responsibility.
that's a great way to put it, and I haven't heard it put that way before. I agree. I think that's a good way to put it, because you do see Sigmas tending to be very very active in the world and making things happen. Probably the most famous outside of Batman in the movie world, at least, or in literature, is James Bond. He's a really good example of a Sigma, where he has all the capacities of an alpha, but by God, he does not work well in teams. He does not want to take responsibility for any other people. He just wants to do things his own way and make shit happen, and he makes it happen. So it's probably it's like the lonely alpha, the lone wolf, alpha wolf in a way, the Sigma. And I believe there are some other archetypes in the sociosexual hierarchy, as you said before, where we start off with an overly simple, dichotomy of alpha beta, and then we end up with these six stages. There are others like lambda that I don't know enough about to comment on, and maybe we can do another episode in the future where we drill down further. But I think that these particular six are probably the most common, and most people will fit into one of these boxes pretty well behaviorally. So why don't we jump back to the alphas and let's talk in a bit more detail. And while you and I discuss it, Noah, I'd love people in the chats to just for while we talk about alphas, let's focus on alphas for a minute and type some examples of famous alphas, alphas in literature, characters, or historical figures, or living figures. Obviously, probably the most famous and important living alpha is Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. He is absolutely an alpha in every sense of the word. So, what are the characteristics in your estimation of an alpha, Noah?
So I'm going to look at it from the viewpoint of if you're on the outside, either a woman or you're a man evaluating a hierarchy to join or your own hierarchy, what are the ways that you can know that someone is an alpha? So the alpha is going to be, the alphas always have followers. So that's a big part of how you can tell the alpha from the sigma, for example. Alphas have followers. Some betas and some deltas are working with the alpha. People will be attracted to him. And the best alphas are also looking after, this is partly why it's such a stressful job. They're looking after the needs of people who are following them. They have a mission. The mission might come first, but they are very concerned about the individuals that are following them. So if you're looking in a hierarchy, look to who is giving the instructions. Now, that doesn't mean the one who's talking. Very often it's a beta or a bravo who is talking, because the alpha has delegated that to the bravo. But he'll be the one that the bravo will look to, and you'll see him make a little nod. Yeah, yes, you've done well. Good, you're doing right. And he's going to give he'll step in anytime things go off track.
Yep.
He's the one that lays the foundational direction for the organization.
Kurt,
and he's the one that gets people excited.
Kurt would call him the insurer of last resort in this particular hierarchy.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's a good point to bring up. The insurer of last resort in European culture was usually the king.
Yep.
So the only one above the king was God. So principles were above the king, but everything else, all the realm on earth, was below the king. And the king didn't get involved in petty matters. He didn't need to. He had people to do that. That's another way you can tell an alpha. He doesn't get involved in petty matters. He focuses on the important decisions, on the leadings. So if you're looking to someone, for example, if you're a person that can't not respond to everyone who annoys you on social media, you're not an alpha. The alpha doesn't care. He doesn't care what. As one guy I know who's quite an alpha, he said to me, he says you don't care what other people think because they're not important unless they're in your group.
Yep. Yeah. That's it. The hierarchy is everything.
Doesn't mean you don't respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you don't respond because you may have a reason to do so for teaching or for fulfilling your own reasons, but you don't feel that obligation to respond. The alpha though, and you can see this in chimpanzee society where it's everything is very simple compared to human society. It's simplified that the alpha has very high levels of cortisol. He has very high levels of stress.
Mm,
He is extremely concerned about the health of the group.
mm,
It is an extremely stressful position. It's as stressful as the omega's position. The top is as bad as the bottom.
mm.
There are better benefits to the top. The top is going to get the most attention. The man who gets the most attention in the group, very often the alpha, and he's not seeking it. The attention seeks him.
Now this paints a very different picture to the pickup artist, oversimplification of the hierarchy, where the alpha is just the guy who goes out and gets the girls, right? But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your interests in life, it is true of the alpha that, as you say, the attention comes his way, whether he likes it or not. And alpha males tend to have a very difficult time maintaining fidelity in a monogamous relationship because women hurl themselves at them all the time. Women want alpha men. They can't help it. They're just sexually attracted to alpha men, because they are the strongest, the most confident, the leaders, and all the men in the hierarchy look to them for that leadership, and it turns women on. So yeah, alphas
And that's
tend.
not a bad thing.
It's
That's
not
not
a
a
bad
bad
thing,
thing.
but it can be if
It's
an
not
alpha
something.
doesn't watch himself. He must stay
Yes.
guarded, especially if he's in a
It'll
marriage.
depend if he's an R selected alpha or a K selected alpha.
Yeah.
I wrote a post about that where the alphas, well, I would say most of the social sexual hierarchy has an R selected or a K selected variant.
That's a good point.
So, alphas don't chase women. If you're chasing women, you're not an alpha.
Mm.
Women are chasing you, you're probably an alpha.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a sigma, but you're probably an alpha. And you will then make the decision what to do with that attention. So if you're an R selected alpha, you will look at attention you're getting as free resources and you'll indulge until you die. So, oh, I free women. Oh, I'll take as many as I can. People want to give me money to be in my presence. I'll take as much of it as I can. And you'll see this with a lot of entertainers, a lot of R selected alpha entertainers. People want to be around them. People want to pay to hear their entertainment, their music, or whatever, and they will indulge in everything they can indulge in until it literally kills them.
Yeah, they'll end up with
Then you have the
syphilis.
K select, yeah, until they die of syphilis.
Yeah.
The K selected alpha is going to see all those resources that are coming his way and say, how can I invest these in the betterment of my tribe, in
Yeah.
the reproduction of my genome? He's going to think, how's this going to be good for my kids, my family, the people who are on my team? How is this going to be good for my team? And so it's a very different.
That's an excellent layer of analysis to add in. That I hadn't considered. Obviously, RK selection is a great tool in itself to understand, and we'll probably do another Patriarch Hour focused on that. But yeah, to understand that for this hierarchical structure, there is an R and a K. In the comic book movies, there's a dark and a light, which is again an oversimplification, but it makes for good mythology, in the case of Batman. But in reality, in real life, yeah, the R and K are the two sides of the hierarchy, and each of these could exist on either side of that divide. So we should definitely continue to look at all of these archetypes through both lenses, I think, as we go.
Yes, it's a great way to understand. I had this issue with people coming to me and saying, I don't want to be an alpha. Not that they would have a choice if they were, but they said, I don't want to be an alpha. I don't want to be more alpha. I don't want to be a jerk that just, uses women like tools and blah, blah, blah. And this was not my concept of an alpha. This just didn't occur to me because I'm very K selected. I didn't even think of this type of a man as being an alpha. But then I thought, society's view of the alpha is the James. No, he's a sigma. The society's view of the alpha is the womanizer.
Yeah, well, we could
You
say
know,
that the
the
feminarchy society that we live in views the alpha
yes,
that way. Yeah.
exactly, because the feminarchy is very R selected.
Mm.
And myself, I thought, right from the beginning in a very K selected way. And I had to make a synthesis between these two concepts. And it's not a line, it's a grid. So you have an R and a K selected version for each part of the hierarchy. And this helps to understand it a lot better. Why do men because very often the alpha are in both groups, both R and K, will be very similar. They're usually strong, they're usually attractive, they're usually dominant men. Why are some men taking all of those traits and using them in a very different way than other men? And
Mm.
this has to do with how they're looking at things through the RK selection prism. Basically, R selection, extreme individualism. K selection, is more of a voluntary collectivism. So, K selection is the father archetype, and R selection is the player archetype.
And I would add
And
that our selection is about short time horizons because it's coming from
yes,
an enlarged amygdala and a place of fear of it's coming from a place of um, an a lack of awareness of the scarcity of resources. And so when you believe, because you're in a enlightened, welfare state where resources are just being thrown your way no matter what, that the resources around you are abundant and always will be, then you tend to get into that pleasure seeking, hedonism, short time horizons. Who gives a shit about next month? I'll just take all the pussy and all the money I can get now. K selection is much more about being acutely aware of the scarcity of resources and acting accordingly. We come back to Aesop's fables here. Where the clever ant, hoards his resources in the times of abundance to be ready for the times of scarcity, and that's a K selected trait. Although I suppose an ant is probably a K selected creature, just a very very small one, but yeah, so there's that hyper individualism of our selection, and also the abundance mentality, whereas K selected is more collectivist because you have to be part of a strong collective to survive in times of scarcity.
yeah,
In a
and the time
nutshell, that's
horizon
the
parts is very important. If you're a father, you're thinking about what's good for your children. So you're at least thinking one generation ahead. If you're a very K selected father, you're thinking about what's good for your grandchildren. You're raising your grandchildren's parents. And if you are a very, very K selected man, you're thinking about how to form a dynasty that will last for, maybe 1,000 years. You're trying to think how to set things up so that the wisdom of generations isn't lost over time.
mm.
And on the other hand, if you're very R selected, you're thinking about how much pleasure can I get in the next 5 minutes. And if you're doing that, you're probably watching porn in another window or something while you're listening to this.
So, a good example of an R selected alpha would be, hey, go down to any nightclub and look for the tallest, broader shouldered guy who all the girls are hanging around, and who's probably going to take several of them home. There's an R selected alpha.
Yeah,
But
some of them.
yeah, 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 yeah. And a good example of a K selected alpha would be Genghis Khan. Who actually created a dynasty of 6 million descendants living today, because he could get the pussy any way he wanted it, but he also was building a team, building an army who swept across the northern plains and swept across Europe and conquered the world and established a very long dynasty, and his genetic dynasty continues to this day. So I would say Genghis Khan was probably K selected and was definitely an alpha.
Yeah, and the K selected men in the long run, because they have a long term view of things, they have a very powerful influence on the future of humanity in the long term. They are selected though, because what they're doing can be so attractive to young people, they can sway the ideas and moods of young people in the short term. Uh, K wins in the long term, R wins in the short term.
Yep, absolutely. Now, before we move on to Bravos, I'm just going to read through some of the comments here. Of course, it had to happen. One of the first names dropped for Alpha was Hitler. Well, yeah, absolutely. Hitler was an Alpha, to be sure. Built a strong team and built a nation around him who supported him and loved him. and and led the way and
And had a deep
made things
concern
happen.
for people,
Yeah,
and he had a deep concern for people that were in his in group.
in his group. Yeah, that's
That's
right.
Yeah, in his group.
Yeah.
He had a deep concern for those people to the point where he was willing to do anything to protect them.
Yes, yeah, including the total ostracism of the people who did not belong to his hierarchy, and take from that what you will.
Well,
Some other example.
the very tight hierarchy was a big part of German society. It still is somewhat culturally in the Germanic people, but these tight hierarchies, where it's very clear who's in what position,
Mm,
was a very German thing, and so it really appealed to the German people to have someone who would be at that top of the hierarchy, the top of the top of the top of the German hierarchies.
yeah, possibly why the German people had to be destroyed in order for the feminarchy to exist, but we won't get too deep into that tonight. Now we've had some other suggestions. MacArthur, it's spelt incorrectly, but I'm assuming General MacArthur. Absolutely, you can't be a general if you're not an alpha. It's really important. I mean, the military is a place where, at least traditionally, maybe not the converged militaries of today, which are falling apart and will not be able to cope with the wars that are coming, but the militaries of the past, absolutely, these hierarchies had to be clear and established, and you could not become a general unless the men loved and respected you. So it was very crucial, and the generals who lost the love and respect of the men, or who gained their position through nepotism or through dishonest means, usually didn't last very long at all. Mutiny,
Yeah,
would tend to happen to those leaders.
you'll often be reading about a general, and someone will say, he's the kind of guy we would have gladly marched to our deaths for.
Mm.
I,
Yeah,
I've heard that described about several different leaders, and this is very important that the it is a concern. The alpha has a deep concern for the people that he's over. But when you're on the top of several hierarchies, you end up becoming more concerned with the organization's survival than the survival of an individual.
mm,
And that can sound very harsh. Alphas can make decisions that people lower down on the hierarchy think are cruel and horrible and terrible and psychopathic. And sometimes they are. Sometimes there are people on the top doing that. But sometimes it is simply their overriding desire to make sure that the hierarchy survives and that the majority of the hierarchy is going to be healthy. And they might sacrifice members of the hierarchy for it.
mm.
And believe it or not, that's part of the reason why you have very few people who want to be at the top of a hierarchy.
Yes,
People don't want to make tough decisions.
yeah,
The level of agency required to make decisions when you're at the top of a hierarchy is so huge that it kills you slowly. Take a look at anyone who's been president, and look, 8 years, they age like 30 years,
yeah, absolutely.
because it's really tough being at the top.
And those brutal decisions, coming back to Bane from the Batman series is a good example there. He makes decisions to sacrifice the lives of his followers willingly. To say, here's your opportunity to die for the cause, and they do it. But he also very quickly and unceremoniously disposes of the men below him who prove themselves to be weak or incompetent. He just kills them. So that's the psychopathic alpha there. And as far as the function of achieving his goals, they're necessary decisions to make, and only an alpha can make them. Now,
And
oh, sorry, go on.
interestingly, most men would rather be in a hierarchy with a psychopathic alpha than be in no hierarchy at all, because at least you've got somebody watching out for you to some extent, and you have some protection of the group. When you're
Mm,
completely, we live in this kind of mushy, safe society, unless you're in London and you're near a knife. We got this kind of safe society, and so we don't feel the need for day-to-day protection from a male hierarchy. But this is a aberration in society. Things will snap back,
mm.
and when they do, men will prefer to be in a hierarchy with Bane than they will be to be on their own and exposed.
Yeah, yeah,
So this is why it's so important that the good alphas, the men who are good,
mm,
that we support these men, because otherwise you're not going to get a choice. You're either going to make a good choice now, or someone else is going to make the choices for you, or you're going to cease to exist.
Yeah, yep. This is the lesson of history, to be sure. A few other examples, just to skip through quickly. Blair Cottrell, an Australian alpha, definitely an alpha. Odysseus, yeah, yeah, for sure. Probably, in my opinion, the great alpha of ancient literature. You know, he was such a loving and concerned and decisive leader to his men on that mission to get them home. Yeah, Odysseus is a great example. Jesus has been listed, but I would say, you know, Jesus is necessarily outside of the hierarchy, and as he himself, you know, said, "I am the Alpha and the Omega." He is far beyond any human hierarchies in that way. But you know, you saw plenty of alpha moments from Jesus on his walk in the years that he was here on Earth. Teddy Roosevelt, Alexander the Great, Duterte in the Philippines. Yeah, absolute alpha. These are good examples. Nigel Farage, yeah, in his own way, for sure. He's an alpha. He's been very effective in rallying and leading Britain out of the EU, which has been great. Now, somebody has listed James Bond here, but we did mention earlier Bond, as Tion rightly says in the comments. James Bond looks a lot like an alpha because of his strength, his power, his conviction, his effect on women, but he's not a good leader of men. He, in fact, really rebels against any opportunity to lead other men. He always wants to do his own thing, and he really disses the men who get put below him, and they don't hang around for very long. So Bond is a Sigma, that he has all the capacities of an alpha, except that he does not want to be part of a hierarchy, and he does not want to take responsibility for other people. He just wants to take responsibility for getting the job done, and that's the Sigma characteristic. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And if you see his character,
Sorry, go on.
part of the reason he's like that is because he's very obviously operating under some trauma, and he feels if he takes responsibility for people that he won't be able to do a good job of it. You know, I think a lot of Sigmas are people that they could have been an alpha if something has happened to them to make them not want the pain of looking. It hurts to be the alpha if you are a good person. They don't want the pain of being responsible for people and having to sacrifice them, having to, you know, not being able to save everybody. You just can't always do that. And so they're trying to avoid that pain.
Maybe. See, you're speaking as an alpha. I'm a Sigma, and so that doesn't quite ring true for me. But we can get into that when we get to the Sigma stuff too.
Okay.
But
I would love to be enlightened about it.
yeah, well, I mean, I only know myself, you know, so and I don't spend time around other Sigmas. I mean, it tends not to happen because again, we're outside of the hierarchy as much as we can be.
It's a group of lone wolves.
Yeah. That's right. And Arnold Schwarzenegger listed, and I would say Arnold Schwarzenegger is the king alpha of the boomer generation, hands down. He took the culture and the goals and the money mindset and the game of that whole period in which he was coming up and the whole boomer generation, and he won. Like Schwarzenegger, I disagree with a lot of his politics, but I have so much respect for him as a businessman and as an entrepreneur and as a personality and certainly as a bodybuilder. So yeah, definitely an alpha.
Most of the characters he plays are Sigmas, but he himself is definitely an alpha. If you were to see a wide shot of any of times him working in the gym, and if you see like some of the just candid shots, there's always 3 or 4 other guys. He was always working out with other guys. He was always had somebody that was coming up under him, working out near him, and a couple of guys at his level working out with him.
Yes.
He was never a loner by himself type guy.
He was such he is to this day such a sociable, people loving guy who, you know, wants to lead and encourage others. So that's definitely an alpha. All right, it goes on and on and on. And I'm really glad to see the chats are so active tonight. So we'll move on anyway to the Bravos. So yeah, once again, you know, beta has that negative connotation because Bravos, you know, they don't have as much difficulty as the beta archetype made out with women. You know, Bravos actually do pretty well with women because they benefit from the sort of the trickle down effect, for want of a better analogy, from being around the alphas. You know, those lieutenants who are seen in the proximity of an alpha tend to get the it sounds shallow, but you know, we're being real here. They tend to get the second tier women very interested in them because the alpha
and second tier being the alpha gets the first 3 or 4 9s, and they get the 8s and 9s that he can't handle. So it's not like they're getting 3s and 4s.
Yeah, that's right.
They're still getting
high quality women.
They're still getting high quality women.
Yeah, and it's within that hierarchy, within that group. And this is where the dichotomy fails again of alpha beta, because the alpha also, as we've discussed, is very loyal, particularly to his bravos. And in a situation where you've got an alpha and a bravo going in together to approach, or to be approached by women, where there's a situation where there's women there who are taking an interest, it's pretty clear who's going to get the 10 or the 9, and but the alpha does not abandon his bravo to figure it out for himself. He helps him out. He makes sure that his mate has a nice girl to talk to as well. And that's just in the pickup and the sexual side of things. But in the military side of things, in the business side of things, and in the social side of things, the relationship between the alpha and the bravo is a sacred one. You know, it's a brotherly, it's a big brother little brother relationship, and a very wholesome and healthy one.
Yeah, bros before farm implements. I mean, hose. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So let's have some examples of bravos in the comments of anyone you can think of. But these are the trusted lieutenants who demand loyalty as well. They do tend to get upset if the alpha fails to acknowledge them and be loyal to them in that way. But they're the guys who will take those second tier leadership positions and do the slightly less difficult work of decision making and delegation down the hierarchy. Once again, these are the again, just picture that pyramid. These are the second tier guys. What can you tell us about bravos, Noah?
Well, and you'll see this in a lot of very large organizations. So if you have a massive organization, you can't have a only one alpha at the top. So what you'll end up having is multiple smaller organizations make up the bigger organization. Simply because if your organization is to the point where you can't physically interact and know people, it's very hard to manage them. You can send instructions downstream, but you're not really managing them because they can't let you know when they need things. It's very, very hard. We have modern technology that makes it a lot easier to track what people are wanting. But basically, a lot of these bravos, they will form a pseudo alpha at the top of a team that's under the command of the alpha. A good example of this is for the alpha, for example, would be Charlemagne. And Charlemagne had, I think it was 12 knights that were under him, Roland and several others who were betas. But when they would go out with a group of men, they were the alpha at that point.
Yes.
So they would take that responsibility on, but then they come home and they can put the responsibility off. The alpha never can put down the weight.
Yes.
The alpha is Atlas holding the world, and he never gets to put it down. And the Bravo, he has that option. The Bravo is able to come home and say, okay, the mission you sent me on is done, and here's what happened, and now I can put the weight down.
Yeah.
And he can have that period of relaxation. And that's why it's so good to be a Bravo. Because you get almost everything that the alpha gets, but you can put it down when you want.
Yeah, that's right. And given the choice, I think if we could just choose, I would choose to be a Bravo. But a Bravo cannot exist without his alpha. And so this is why there are so many, intelligent, competent, courageous men who are just looking for that great leader to follow. They're just looking for that one guy to be their alpha. And once they identify him and that trust is built, they get behind him. And, Hitler came up as an early example in the chats tonight of an alpha. Well, he had around him a team of of Bravos, who made it all happen. They were his right hand men who did all of his bidding and took that immense and radical action in Germany that really changed the face of the place. And you can take any general or any leader. It's interesting thinking about Trump in the scheme of things. He seems to be this alpha dropped into a swamp of gammas, and it seems hard to know who his bravos are. Who are the guys that he can really trust? Who
I
are
have a
his?
feeling. I have a feeling he's protecting his bravos by keeping them out of the limelight
Mm,
and sacrificing a ever-ending stream of nobodies or people that he wants to get out from the deep state out of government by making them seem like they're like he actually cares what they think,
yeah,
and then dumping them when he's capable of doing it, when he can get rid of them.
yeah,
I think he has a fellow, I don't remember the name of him, who's been in charge of his security for like 25 years. He's still with him.
yeah,
These kind of guys, these are, I mean, that's a very good example of it. King's always had a guy whose his only job was, I'm going to look after the security. That's it. I just worry about the king's safety and security. It's another
yeah.
guy. I'm only worried about making sure he doesn't get poisoned. It's another guy. The bishop is here. He worries about his eternal soul. And then this is people that are under him taking care of the alpha so that the alpha can take care of the pyramid.
Yep. And one of our viewers here, who I'll just call PLP, says Mike Pence is a Bravo under Trump, and of course that's he's in the Bravo position absolutely as the vice president, and I think he's a Bravo type personality. The degree to which he is actually effective or involved in the decision making and the pulling of the levers of power, I don't really know. I haven't really kept up with, the vice president role in some ways is really just an honorary role as the backup guy if the president gets hurt, and you often find the VP doesn't get much authority or much power. But I do respect Mike Pence as a man. And I think he is definitely the Bravo type personality. So as far as the sort of the inner core team of lieutenants who are actively involved in the Trump administration, as you say, I think a lot of them are probably invisible to us, and with good reason, because alphas protect their guys. They're really loyal. They don't just cut them off, and we get a lot of these transient gammas come through, working for Trump, who get laid off very quickly when they screw up. But maybe if for
I
those who
think they're
still
meat
have faith,
shields.
sorry.
Personally, I think he's bringing them in as meat shields.
Oh,
Here,
yep.
shoot at this guy. Now, this guy, he's very good at getting his opponents angry, and he's been doing this since long before he got involved in politics. Get his opponents angry at him, and then throw somebody who he didn't want to get rid of anyway, who's no good, who's a pain in the neck. Throw them in front to let them take the flak, and this is actually a very effective technique to purge your organization of the gammas you don't want.
Yep. Yep. Now, in the comments, Andreas Persson is saying, isn't this Gamma and Bravo's thing from Vox Day? Yes, absolutely. Vox is the one who, as we said earlier in the show, who expanded the early dichotomy, the basic iteration of alpha beta, and he broke it out into 6 or 7, and I think more will probably be added, as tends to happen, like with the GSRRM that we were talking about last week. These ideas begin as very simple ideas, often too simple, then they hit a sweet spot, and then sometimes it can go too far into an overly complex idea. Now, let's have a look at the gamma. We could spend, and probably should spend a whole Patriarch hour or several on the gamma, because these guys are the most dangerous and subversive of all of them, and they're also surprisingly common.
Yes, I think we could term it how to kill the gamma.
Yeah.
In Minecraft, we come across gammas all the
yeah.
time. Yeah, we come across gammas all the time on social media.
Yeah.
It's the perfect breeding ground for gammas, because if you said the kind of things that people say in social media face to face, you get punched in the face. And so people will say it without fear on social media. Alphas don't need to argue with people on social media. We only do it if we use it as a teaching tool. Otherwise, there's no point. We don't feel the need for any validation. On the other hand, gammas are desperate for validation from other people. They really want the attention the alpha gets. They don't want to take on the role of the alpha. They don't want to to do the heavy lifting.
Hmm.
So you'll see this in a lot of organizations. There's usually a bunch of guys going, "We need leadership. We need someone to go out and do the action." You know, I've heard this for years about where the West is collapsing. Why isn't somebody, lead a revolution and
do
take
something.
things over? Yeah, somebody, not me, somebody else do something. This is the gamma.
Or I've got a great idea of
smart.
how it should be done. They're men of ideas, not men of action. Always.
Yes.
And as you say, they're smart. They're usually exceptionally intelligent, but also quite cowardly, deceitful, and self-deluded in many ways.
Yeah, they're the kind of ones that are, when the decision needs to be made, they're there to put in their input. When the work needs to be
Whether
done, they
asked or
disappear.
not.
Yeah, but whether they're asked to or not. But when the payout comes, they're on it like a seagull on a dropped slice of pizza. They're there for all the goodies, and they disappear when the hard stuff comes. And if you have these kind of people in your hierarchy, in your organization, you have to ruthlessly purge them if you're the alpha. That is your job. In fact, you might say that is the number one job of the alpha, besides looking after his people, is purging the gammas.
Yeah, well, their effect, their negative effect on the hierarchy and on organizations and on society can't be overstated, and it comes from that unwillingness to know their place, because a hierarchy relies upon, again, if you look at the sort of the perfect functional example of a hierarchy, you look at a Roman legion, and if one guy starts stepping out of his role and claiming that he has more authority than the legate above him, then it's going to create a real mess. But that wouldn't have been tolerated very much in a Roman legion at all. But this is the thing: is society functions better when a hierarchy is stable, and the gamma instinct is to destabilize the hierarchy, and it's through that witty, intelligent, subversive nature that they have, and through those. The gift they often have with words, verbally intelligent people, they tend to be very verbally intelligent, and they will, as you say, put in their opinion whether it's asked for or not. And we get it a lot in the comment sections. We get it sometimes in the chats, and men these days displaying a greater intolerance for gammas tends to be the best approach. Make an example of them if you can, but don't let them hang around and stink up the joint. And they're the kind of people who will shout at you why they're the best, the smartest, why they have authority, or why you should listen to them because they've been around. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, or whatever. That kind of stuff tends to be how they frame their abuse and their assault of the hierarchy, and it comes from.
Well, they're masters of GSRRM.
Yeah,
they're masters of the stuff we talked about. And I absolutely, if you're watching this and haven't seen the previous video, when you finish this one, go watch the previous video. It's understanding GSRM is life-changing, just the same as understanding the social sexual hierarchy is going to change how you approach life. You're going to understand why people behave in the way they do, and you'll know how to counteract behavior that's not healthy for you.
And as we pointed out in that last episode, GSRRM they are the weapons of the feminarchy, and so they are naturally, the feminarchy being the feminist utopia ideal, which is nonsense, but it's about this phony idea of equalization. It's about taking a functional hierarchy with leaders, lieutenants, deltas, followers, and crushing it and breaking it down. And it's sort of, it's not fair on the really great and exceptional and intelligent women that we love and who are often part of our viewership here, but GSRRM and the gamma mindset is a feminine mindset in a man, whereas the male mindset tends to be much more based on stable hierarchies, facts over feelings, and stating things as they really are. that's a healthier mindset for men to be in, because it's how you, again, looking at the Roman legion, it's how you actually win a war, is to be realistic. You can't rely on your feelings. You can't rely on wishes for equality, wishes for peace. You have to actually look at the situation in front of you and deal with it factually in a stable hierarchy to make things work. So yeah, gammas are dangerous
Yeah.
people.
Having those gammas in there, it can upset the Bravos, although the Bravos often know how to deal with gammas.
Mm,
What it really does is it destroys your core Delta workforce. It destroys their morale. There's a cartoon, or not a cartoon, it's a meme, and it has the 300 Spartans all lined up shoulder to shoulder, and a certain intellectual is got his face plastered on there, and he's going, "Hey, but wait, guys, maybe we should just all split up and fight the Persians individually." And
yeah,
this is the kind of stuff that the Gamma would say. Yeah, yeah. The leader doesn't know what he's doing. We should be doing it this much better way. I have a much better way to solve this problem. Let's all follow me. And then they'll
yeah,
propose something which has never worked in history before, but somehow, due to their lack of leadership experience, they think this is going to work.
yeah,
If you're looking for, there are alphas who have no leadership experience because they're just getting started, but most men who are naturally alphas have been leading people since childhood.
yeah,
I take my son to his boxing club, and he's in there at the boxing club telling the kids. He's 6. He's telling the 12-year-olds what to do, and he's kind of like pushing them around a little bit. And on the way out, all the girls say bye to him. They don't say anything to the other kids. This is just
the
yeah. They don't say anything
microcosm.
to the other boys. They're all pay attention to him. They don't pay any attention to the other boys. And this
Yeah,
is just the way it is. By the time that you become an adult, you don't know how to behave anywhere else except for in leadership position.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, this is the thing, is that gammas will fake that authority, but once the hierarchy, once the bravos or the genuine alphas hand their asses to them, everyone notices, and the girls are always paying attention. And so, while, as I mentioned earlier, gammas find an advantage in isolation, take a woman away from the hierarchy, and they can come across as very intelligent, extremely romantic. They often suffer from obsessive one-itis, and go to extreme lengths, and they sometimes become stalkers. But they go to extreme lengths to win the affections of women, and they do it intelligently. Except that often women are just creeped out by them and can smell them, and if a woman is, well, these also tend to be the male feminists, and so they prey on the women who hate the hierarchy. They prey on the women who see all alphas as toxically masculine, and but ultimately it doesn't pan out for them. I think generally, what we talked
And
about.
if you're a man and you have these tendencies, I've known a lot of men that had some gamma tendencies, and they wanted to get rid of them.
Mm,
They really weren't full blown gammas, but they understood that they were sometimes acting like one. A lot of them were deltas, sometimes acting a little bit like a gamma, or Bravo maybe acting a bit like a gamma. So the way that you cure yourself of this, if you're a man, is get into the most masculine hierarchy you can, and humble yourself to take the beatings that you're going to receive
mm.
until you change your behavior.
Yep.
They're going, I don't necessarily mean physically, but they're going to tell
Sometimes,
you
sometimes physically
that
is
your
good too.
behavior is wrong, and that's going to let it prune out your bad behavior. Let them remind you and prune out your bad behavior, if they'll even let you be there.
Yes.
But show that humility. And the good thing about alphas is they're very often willing to, people who want to change, they're very often willing to let them have that opportunity to change. They're going to let them have it. You're going to hear about it if you didn't do a good job, but they're going to let you try.
Yeah.
Take the advantage of the opportunity, try, and don't fail.
Yeah. But the crucial ingredient for that to work is self honesty. Now, if you can honestly say, yeah, I think I'm a gamma, or I think I have too many gamma traits, then you're on your way, because the problem for most gammas is they cannot take that step. They honestly believe that they're alphas. and they just get into these cyclic behaviors that they can't break free of. And once you see that there's no curiosity, there's no self-reflection, there's no ability to be honest about their own faults and an attempt to work on them within the hierarchy, you just have to get rid of them. And it's that ostracism that actually might help them. It's an act of, it's an act of intolerant love. They might, if it happens to them enough, if enough good men who are part of a stable hierarchy do not tolerate their bullshit, then it might actually just change them. It might actually just give them the impetus they need to really change things. The example you gave before about the meme with Jordan Peterson whispering to Leonidas, "Oh, I don't know, Leonidas." It's what Vox Day calls the secret king complex, and I think that's the perfect way to characterize the alpha. And it's not to characterize the gamma, who thinks he's an alpha. He's the secret king. If everyone would just recognize my brilliance, if everyone would just recognize how amazing and intelligent and what a gifted leader I am and how manly and perfect I am, then the world would be a better place and things would go well. But, people know. We instinctively know who the real alphas are, and we don't give respect to gammas because they're not really alphas.
Yeah. And what often happens is if a gamma finally comes to that, if you come to the realization young, it's not so embarrassing. But if you come to that realization as a full mature adult man, it's really hard at that point to change your behavior. And you come to that realization, it can crush you.
Yeah.
It can completely destroy you. And you'll see men have a total collapse because they never got the success that they thought that was owed to them because of their amazingness. They never got that success, and now it's too late, and now they feel crushed, and it's terrible. It's very unhealthy. Better deal with this stuff when you're young.
And that's a great summary and probably a good place to finish on the gammas. Is this notion of being owed something? If that's remotely in your head, just drop it now. The world owes you nothing. If you want success, take it with your own hand. Take action. Improve yourself, develop your agency, put yourself in a good hierarchy with men you respect, and work hard. Humble yourself and work hard. The world owes you nothing except death, and the world is going to give you death one way or another, but, make it count until then. And, I wish best of luck to all the gammas out there who are honestly self-reflecting and wanting to change. They have a very good chance of becoming deltas. Gammas will never be alphas. So they have to let that go, but they can be deltas, and we'll talk about deltas now. The Jim Gordons, the foot soldiers of the world, the people who make up the bulk of the hierarchy. They sit at the bottom of the stable hierarchy. Omegas and sigmas are outside of the hierarchy. Omegas are not the most voluminous segment of the hierarchy. The deltas are. They're the guys upon which society is built. They're the guys who get out and do the hard work. They're the laborers. They're the blue collar workers. They're the guys who actually get out. They're the construction workers, contractors, the guys who make stuff actually happen and make the world turn. And by God, do we rely on them and need to give them our respect.
Yeah, these people are very important because, as you said, they're the ones that make the world turn.
Yeah.
An alpha without a hierarchy is pretty much useless. You get nothing done. You're kind of like it's like having a Ferrari engine just sitting on your driveway. You can't drive it. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's just sitting there. You got to have the full hierarchy in order to get things done. And the hierarchy runs on the wheels of the hierarchy are the deltas. Without them, you're not going anywhere. You can have all the good ideas you like. You can know how to lead. You can have a few lieutenants, but if nobody follows you, you don't have a functional hierarchy. You have a children's club, basically, where you get together and talk about doing stuff. To actually get stuff done, you need to be able to create that. And going back to Donald Trump, we see during the election, he was able to mobilize the voters and the people to go out and knock on doors and actually get people to vote in a way that nobody had done since the Second World War.
Yeah, and his campaign was aimed right at the Rust Belt. It was aimed right at the steel industry, and that's where you find, it's in those sweaty, dirty industries that make things function that you find the deltas, and they have been thoroughly disrespected by the elites in America and in the West as a whole for far too long now. that that so many of them were killed off in World War One and World War Two because they were literally the foot soldiers, the cannon fodder for these bullshit wars. And since they have been increasingly disrespected because they're because of this cosmopolitan, abundant, R-selected welfare state that we live in. You got all of these coastal yuppies and hipsters who look down their noses at the what they call them, the flyover states in America. And so that Trump was speaking straight to those people and saying, "You've been screwed, and I'm here to fix that. I'm going to get the economy and the industries in line. I'm going to become more protectionist economically. I'm going to be less about global free trade, and I'm going to help you guys." Man, did it mobilize the deltas?
His real message was, we have allowed a bunch of gammas to take control of things.
Yeah.
They are not alphas. The real alpha is here, and I'm going to look after you deltas, but you're gonna have to support me.
Mm.
The real alpha is here. We're gonna clean out all of these fakers. I mean, look at him with the fake news, the fake this, the fake that. He's saying they're gammas.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
the
I
names
mean,
the names he gives everyone. Mini Mike for Bloomberg. Yeah, he's a master of pointing out the fakers and the gammas. And this is a crucial thing to realize, looking at America as a whole, looking at the West as a whole, and the global, modern world, is that we are ruled by an elite who are predominantly gammas. Foreign gammas, in fact. America is run by non-Americans who are gammas. And all it takes is for the right number of alphas with their loyal bravos and an army of deltas to stand up and say that's enough, and the great purging of gammas begins, and America, could be restored to some kind of greatness again. MAGA could happen, but not while the gammas are in power.
If you kill the alphas and you allow the gammas to get into power, you get the French Revolution.
Yeah.
The deltas get whipped up by the gammas. You end up with a French Revolution, and you end up with 100 years of bloodshed.
Mm.
And the difference is who's going to be in charge. Gammas cannot be alphas. They can't be in charge. They cannot run and maintain things. They end up becoming parasitical really quickly because they get into a position of power, and all they see is what they can get out of it, and they have no sense of responsibility of caring and looking after what they've inherited as an alpha. Most hierarchies are very old, and you end up inheriting a hierarchy. You work in a company, you get promoted, the company's been around before you. Even if you start up a company, you're doing it within an economy, which is a hierarchy, which is older than you. And so you have to have some respect for what was there before you, and you have to have respect for what you're going to leave afterwards. And the gammas, they don't think about any of that because they're deluded.
Yeah.
And the elites that are running the West are deluded.
Mm. And I think we've got this structure right with these four first tiers as far as the quantity of them goes. There are fewer alphas than any. The next in line are the bravos. Then there are gammas and deltas. So there are more deltas than there are gammas, but gammas have gotten in between the foot soldiers, the hard workers, the muscle, and the necessary labor force of the world. The gammas have gotten in between them and their leaders, their true leaders, the alphas and the bravos. So really, the deltas need to learn to recognize the gammas in their midst and start looking past them to the bravos for leadership and for instruction. Stop taking orders from the secret kings and start taking orders from the real kings who will really look after your interests. And that's how the hierarchy becomes stable again.
Yeah, a couple of great examples of that are of the gamma trying to appeal to the deltas is Bernie Sanders. He's definitely a gamma, and he's there trying to appeal to the deltas.
Mm.
He's coming along with, I want to be in charge. I've never been in charge of anything in my life before. And any time that I had any responsibility, I failed. But I think I can run the country on the ideas that have failed everywhere else they've been tried. I'd like to try them here. And he's really
What
trying to appeal to
wrong?
yeah. And I mean, you'll see in Canada, Justin Trudeau, extreme gamma.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's been able to be elected because of the gynocracy has destroyed the male hierarchy
Mm.
in Canadian culture, so he doesn't get called out. Now, what would have happened before is men used to get together in groups, and the deltas would have said like, "Who are we voting for?" And the alphas would have said, "Anyone but Justin Trudeau."
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
betas would have backed him up on that and spread the message. And the deltas would have gone, "Oh, yeah, you're right. He is a gamma.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to support him. That's going to turn out bad for me." We don't have that in I'm Canadian originally. We don't have that in Canada
Mm.
anymore. We don't
No,
have a lot of male groups, period. Men don't get together. Men are isolated.
we're,
And
we're living
so
we're
that
living in a
allows,
post patriarchy world now. We're living in a feminarchy, and as you say, the how did you put it before, the gynarchy? Um, it's the women have far too much social influence on uh, traditionally male structures of power. And this is why we're seeing that universal suffrage and democracy that includes women has become degenerate, dysgenic, and it's failing, and it will ultimately return, if democracy is able to continue at all into the future, it will have to return to being a male oriented structure to be stable,
and
because
even
it's
then,
that.
and even then, ideally, the gammas and the omegas will not be voting. So it's not going to be
Yeah.
men only. It's going to be only men that are productive will vote, because neither of those two groups are productive.
Well, the good thing about omegas is they step out altogether. They tend not to show up to the voting booth. They tend not to show up to the world at all, and there's very few of them, I think. Um, so yeah, I'm not too worried about the omegas, but the gammas have excessive influence because they are absolutely playing on the. Well, you could argue that it's gammas who have created the feminarchy. It's gammas who have agitated for universal suffrage. It's gammas who have, used that intelligence and that sneakiness to take the European patriarchy and destroy it by subversion from within. So it will be the
If you
removal of the
can't be an
gammas from
alpha,
society that changes it.
if you can't be an alpha, you want to smash the patriarchy. If you're a man and you can't be an alpha, you want to smash the patriarchy.
Yeah, that's
If you
right.
can bring everyone down to your level, if you can bring everyone down to your level, then you got a shot at those eights and nines, or so you think. Of course, it's underestimating women's disgust for those type of guys. But if you can smash things, and then you like you said, they often have a lot of verbal ability, and so they're able to pull the wool over deltas and women's eyes, and you end up with the situation that we have now.
That's right. But once again, deltas, who we rely upon, who we trust, who we honor, they are the backbone of society, and they are far greater in number than the gammas. So all it takes is for alphas and bravos to mobilize as the new leadership, to purge the gammas from their midst, and to speak directly to the deltas, as Trump has set a fine example for in the political world, and for the deltas to begin to recognize, learn these concepts, learn these tools, and begin to recognize the gammas who are bossing you around, and start ignoring them, or if you need to, rise up against them. And once we get the gammas out of the way, the deltas will shine, and the deltas will also be respected. They will receive the benefits of being part of that great stable hierarchy when we've rebuilt it. So
Well,
Delta's a
we
great
talked
place
about
to
building.
be. Delta's a
Yeah,
great place to
we
be.
talked about building a patriarchy 2.0,
Mm.
and for the vast majority of men who are deltas, what that means is you're going to have a very high quality of life. You're going to have a very stable life. No one's going to be preying on you. Alphas and bravos are going to be making sure that the shit doesn't hit the fan, that you can just focus on your life and your wife and your kids and your job, and enjoying your hobbies and sports and doing things that you like to do. I think, especially in the United States, a lot of the deltas, they don't care about politics. They don't want to get involved in politics. They just want to live their life. They want to work their job. Can't we have somebody who's going to take care of that kind of stuff for us? Because we've got like things to do. They're usually deltas, are they're busy. They're hard workers, and the failure of alphas and betas to suppress the gammas and to alphas and bravos to suppress the gammas and to do our job of leading is why we're in the situation we're in. And I
Yeah.
do think it's cyclical. You mentioned the Second World War, and I think that had a lot to do with shifting the power. The gammas never went to war. They stayed home. Yeah,
Well, I would
sent the
argue the
alpha.
Gammas
It's the
engineered the
Bravos.
war. They engineered the war from
Yeah,
home. Yeah.
yeah. They engineered the war, and then they sent everybody else to die so that
Yeah.
they could end up getting more power.
Yes.
And almost all of the great rapid increases in the and the gynocracy, or what were you calling it again? The
Femin-
femocracy, were
feminarchy.
the feminarchy happened while the alphas, the bravos, and the deltas were away fighting each other.
That's right. They stay at home, and this is a. I mean, we're really getting stuck on Gammas, but it can't be overstated just how important they are in the degeneration of Western civilization, and how much they have to be culled and removed from our midst. But yeah, Gammas are the guys who will move in on a woman while her husband is off in the Middle East. You know, in the military, he's the sneaky neighbor who'll come in and start preparing for her imminent widowship in order to move in, and steal the resources. They're the guys who are going to try to cuck other men in the grossest ways possible. So they're really not to be trusted at all. Fortunately, as we said, most women are pretty savvy to how gross they are, and it doesn't always work for them, but they will try, by God. So
Yeah,
let's
I
have a
think it's a
look.
good idea. Let's move on to the omega.
Yeah, we're rolling over the hour as always because it's just so fascinating to get into this stuff. We don't need to say too much more about the Omegas. They're the disappearing act. They're the guys who just never fit in, who just have no social skills, who never have a chance with women. Often I would say they're a product of deep and very tragic trauma. And they tend to be the no-hopers. They tend to be morbidly obese. They tend to have short lives because they're physically unwell. They tend to only socialize online, if you could call it socializing, because they tend to be pretty weird and very hard to communicate with. They're not normal human beings. They're unwell. They're often actually diagnosably mentally ill, and yeah, the Joker is a good example. Even in the new Joker movie, Joaquin Phoenix's depiction of the Joker is a classic Omega, the guy who has just been beaten around by life from the moment he was born, been abused and neglected and ignored, and when he snaps, he goes way over the top. And really, really snaps hardcore. So there's not that many of them out there. But they're very broken guys, and I mean, I don't know what to say about them. I don't know how to help them. They exist outside of the hierarchy. They don't really want to be part of the hierarchy. They couldn't be if they tried. And if they can, then they're probably just a damaged delta who just needs a bit of love and care and being part of a community and a bit of healing. But they probably weren't an omega to begin with. What can you tell us about omegas?
I have a lot of compassion for these guys. A
Yeah.
lot of them are young men, because as you mentioned, a lot of them don't live that long. So most of the ones that I come across are young men. They benefit tremendously from coaching, from being around a masculine man. And sometimes they're able to work their way out of that and into being a delta. I've had clients that when they came to me, they were obese, they had no friends, they were so shy they couldn't show me their face on a video chat because they were embarrassed of how they looked. And a year or two later, they've lost the weight, they've made friends, maybe they're even dating. Their entire life is improving dramatically. A lot of these are probably most of them are raised by single mothers or with fathers who were very weak. And the father was basically almost like an older brother rather than a true leader. Every man within his family needs to cultivate the alpha traits that he can cultivate for leading the family. Even if when he goes out to a male hierarchy, he's in a different position within the family, he has to lead, he has to give the example to his sons. And
Yeah,
if
you
he's
can be the alpha of a little hierarchy because it's a fractal hierarchy here where, yeah, as you say, among a big group of men, you may not be the alpha, you may not even be a bravo, but you have to be the alpha of your family as a husband and father.
yeah.
So, well, it's good to hear that that you've had success with guys who are probably omegas. I probably speak for a lot of people in that I haven't had much contact with them. I've met a couple of guys online and in real life who I would say are omegas, but they tend not to maintain stable friendships very long or very well, and they tend not to be very attractive people to become friends with. You know, they often, like, I'm not kidding, they often smell really, really bad, and it's hard to be around them. These are the kind of guys who will go weeks without showering, who don't take care of themselves at all, and you know, they need help, but it's hard to give it to them because they're such loners. They find it hard to accept it. So, you know, I mean, if there's anyone out there who's watching this who you know, feels they might be in that category, get in touch with Noah, because Noah's having success with people. It's not impossible to break out of that depressive state and move into a productive role within the hierarchy. You could become a delta with the right amount of work and consistency. So definitely get in touch with Noah for coaching. And then
you go from the saddest group to the happiest group.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
On the satisfaction range, they're on opposite ends.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You actually can change like that.
Yep. And then Sigmas, we've talked about the Sigma group a bit already, because they're sort of like a mirror image of the alphas in some ways. You know, they are often they often have success with women. They're attractive to women. They often have a lot of people looking to them for leadership. A lot of bravos will pick a Sigma to be their leader, and everything in the Sigma's instinct says, no, I'm not your leader. There is no we. I don't want to be your leader. I just want to do my own thing. And this is my story. You know, I've been a Sigma since I was probably 8 years old and made my first decision about my career path. I've never done things the way others want to do it. I've never been a team player. You know, I've had to work really hard to be able to function as part of a team, you know, but I do have leadership skills, and I do have ambition, and I am interested in getting the job done. And so people often look to me for leadership. So I've had to, and I continue to try to cultivate my alpha traits, while in my heart I'm very much a Sigma, and my instinct tells me, no, just do your own thing. Don't worry about what people want you to do. Don't take that leadership role. So yeah, it's I mean, what do you know about Sigmas? Because it's hard for me to comment from my own perspective.
I know it from my standpoint. I like to network with the Sigmas because we can get together in a group and we don't threat. You know, if you get to, I don't tend to find I get threatened by other alphas. I actually kind of like it because I can if I get together with enough alphas and the group's big enough, I can shift back a little to beta and put that weight off my shoulders, at least for the moment when I'm with them. And that's something alpha normally never gets to do. So it is nice to be around some other real leadership men. But I like to make friends with the Sigmas because we don't threaten each other. We get along really well.
Yeah.
And often when I need something done that nobody else can do, like the Bravos can't do it, I like to have the Sigma around because I can see if he can do it. Because, you know, if he's willing to do it, it's going to get done.
Yeah.
And I think for anyone who's in a leadership position, cultivate those Sigmas. Don't put them in places where they're uncomfortable. Don't put them in charge of a group of people. But if you got one of those lone wolf jobs that need to get done that is crucial to your organization, have those Sigmas ready to send them. You want a hatchet man. You want somebody who's going to go in and clean up a mess and have no mercy. Send in your Sigmas. You know, send in a Sigma to fix it, and keep him. You know, he's your James Bond. He's your guy who's going to go clean up messes that nobody else can clean up. And so it's good. I really enjoy the Sigmas.
Because we Sigmas are inherently, in our own minds at least, outside of the hierarchy, we won't take those hatchet man jobs because you as an alpha tell us to. It's not out of deference to your authority. It's because we really like the sound of doing that. Oh, that'd be fun. I'd like to go and do that hatchet job. I'd like to be that guy who does that for my own satisfaction. So sure, I'll take that gig. But yeah, that's been my experience. And I likewise really enjoy being around alphas because, you know, although there have been times where alphas have mistaken me for an alpha and taken me to be a threat, usually once we get to know each other well enough, that dissipates quickly. I have no interest in stealing anyone else's hierarchy or you know, subverting anyone else's hierarchy. But I like to be around alphas because I like competency. I really have very, very low tolerance for incompetence, and there's no one more competent than alphas, as far as getting stuff done and leadership. And I like to be able to help to rally alphas and their hierarchies into really good causes and doing projects, but on a reciprocal and voluntary basis. So I think in a lot of ways, alphas and sigmas can complement each other. And I guess, now that we're exposing ourselves here, we're a good example of that pairing.
Yeah, and, one of the greatest examples in literature and in Western history of the Sigma was Hercules. So Hercules, he he was an army unto himself, pretty much. He didn't. He would sometimes go along with a group, but he never wanted to take a leadership position. He'd go along with a group because they needed an extra guy. We need an extra hero, or maybe the story needed it. But he was a archetypical Sigma, and when he would come across, he had I can't remember the name of the king. He had a problem with a king. His name began with an O, but the king was a real Gamma, and he constantly felt threatened by Hercules, and would constantly undermine Hercules, and try to sabotage him and do stuff to set him up, because he was not the one who was supposed to be the king. He knew his position was illegitimate to begin with, and so Hercules, when he was respected, he would be willing to sacrifice and work with someone who respected him and who treated him as an equal. But anyone who treated him as less, he would get revenge on. And so this is how you deal with the Sigmas. You treat them as equals, and you solicit their cooperation. You ask for it. You never command, you never demand.
Yeah.
And you make sure that it's 100% reciprocal. And if you do that, they're great to have, not on your team. I was going to say on your team. They're great to have around.
Working for your team temporarily as free agents is probably a good way, and that's how I live. Like, I have never had an employment position. Well, I when I was a teenager, I worked the checkout to save up to get my first guitar, and once I had my first guitar, I've been self-employed ever since. And I don't do well. I wouldn't do well in a permanent employment situation. I'm quite unemployable in that way, because I like to have autonomy. I like to have variety, and I like to step into other people's hierarchies in a temporary way to offer my services, and so that's how I've sort of managed my career to date as a freelancer. And just going my own way, and making decisions for myself. I don't like to be part of anyone else's hierarchy. But it doesn't mean I can't function in harmony and in concert with other hierarchies. So we have our uses.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely, I like to have them around. And if you are a man who thinks you might be a Sigma, and you're not sure, am I a Sigma? I'm having a hard time working with other people, and you're trying to figure this out. If you're very successful at accomplishing tasks by yourself, then you might be a Sigma. If you feel you're a Sigma and you're good at that. If you're not able to accomplish tasks by yourself, you need more direction. You need whatever it happens to be. You need a team to work with. You need to specialize more. Then you maybe just need to work on your social skills at working with people, because you might actually be a Delta.
Yeah.
And you're just not sure what you are. And so I think it's important for men to ask themselves, where do I fit in this hierarchy? If you're a young man, you might at the moment be a Bravo. You might need leadership experience to work up to be an Alpha, and you might be a temporary Alpha once in a while, which is really what Bravos are. They're alphas in like you said, the fractal, in a subset of the hierarchy. And working to figure out where you fit in and honing your skills in that area is going to be a lot more effective than trying to be something you're not. If you are a natural Alpha, you are going to be very unhappy in other positions. You're going to, and it doesn't mean that you don't have someone over you. I don't happen to work for anyone, but the needs of my clients and the principals, more importantly, the principals that I work with, those are over me. They're kind of like the boss. It's that voice in the back of my head that says, this is right and this is wrong. This is the way to walk and follow it. That is my Alpha over me. So there's an Alpha over every Alpha.
Yeah, and there's a mega alpha in God. You know, God is
Yes.
the uber alpha, the alpha of all alphas, and so even if you
And even
are
if you see
the
God,
God Emperor Donald
there's the
Trump, you need to answer to a higher power. I think that's absolutely essential for success and for sanity.
and even if you see the depictions of God, there's always a halo above him, and the halo represents truth.
Mm.
So, and God says, "I cannot lie." You know,
Yes.
so even over God is the his own rules that he set up
Mm.
are over him. So that recognition that a lot of people think that the social hierarchy is the bottom serves the top. It's actually the other way around. The
Yeah.
top serves the bottom.
Yeah.
If you want to lead leadership, sustainable, healthy, long-term leadership is service. You might not be serving necessarily the people specifically. You might be serving the organizational mission,
Yeah.
but you're serving some purpose greater than you. If you're a leader and you don't have a purpose greater than you very quickly become a despot,
Mm.
and that's quite recognizable. Nobody wants to be around a despot. It's not even a totalitarian. You could be totalitarian with a very good purpose, but if you don't have a purpose and something higher than you that you're serving, you end up becoming a despot very quickly, and this ruins the entire hierarchy becomes corrupt very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's really helpful knowledge. Just like last week's show was about recognizing the weapons of the enemies of Western civilization. You know, now recognizing your own place in the hierarchy. Hopefully, tonight's program has given you a pretty clear indication of the evidences to look for. It's not up to you where you are in the hierarchy. This is a matter of nature, and there's not a great deal of mobility. Gammas, because they are, in a way, they're outside of the hierarchy because they are cheating and lying. They have the potential to become deltas. Omegas, because they are the really broken and forgotten guys, they also, if they heal and develop their agency, they can become deltas. But a delta can never be an alpha. A gamma can never be an alpha. And if you're an alpha, you probably already know it because men want to follow you. So being honest with yourself about your position in the hierarchy is a great way to make decisions for your life and career that are going to be conducive to your talents and your abilities, and also begin looking at the men around you and look out for these traits and see where men are best suited. And if you're an alpha, you don't want to put men who are naturally bravos into a delta position. It won't work well. And you also don't want to elevate a delta into the responsibility of being a bravo when he'd be much happier with less responsibility but a lot of hard, honest work to do. So, choosing to structure your organizations and your teams and your clubs and your social circles appropriately if you're an alpha is crucial. So knowing the men around you, and most essentially, because we are in a war that, up until recently we've been losing, recognizing the gamma and purging him from your midst is very, very important. So, study up, guys. Learn more about the socio-sexual hierarchy and talk about it with your mates and try to figure out together, because you can't necessarily place yourself. You do need to consult the men around you and figure out, if it's not clear, where you belong in this hierarchy. Once it's sorted out, things tick along very, very nicely.
Yes, absolutely.
No,
I
it's
think
been
this is
great as always.
fundamental information for men. So
Mm.
thanks for suggesting this topic for this week.
Pleasure, pleasure. And maybe, in a future episode, we can drill down a little bit into some of these. The gamma in particular, it's tempting to talk about them for a long time because we must recognize them and
I
purge them.
think a good topic too to talk about is really aiming it at women is what do they get out of the existence of this hierarchy, and how can they identify the men that are in the hierarchy, and what man is going to be suited for their needs. Not all women are compatible with an alpha.
Hmm.
And you have to be careful which one you get, the R or the K, and things like this.
Yes.
This could be an interesting discussion as well.
Yeah, well, I think the next step would be an in-depth look at RK selection for our audience who may not be familiar with it, and then we could graft the RK model over the socio-sexual hierarchy, one archetype at a time. plenty of things to talk about. Thanks for joining us tonight, everyone. We've had the biggest crowd yet for this year. It's great to see it growing. Please share the video and make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and join us at rationalrise.tv. Noah Revoy, thanks for hanging out. You can find Noah at Noah Revoy on Twitter, where he is triggering gammas and feminists on the daily. It's a very entertaining feed, so make sure you go and follow him. And likewise, I'm on Twitter, Social Galactic, and now at championsofthelight.com. Noah and I are both there. This is our new social media, social network platform that we've established in partnership with Rationalise TV, so you can come and apply to join and join us there. Gammas not allowed. Gammas need not apply. Thanks, guys. All right, everyone, have a great week. We'll see you next time for Patriarch Hour. Thank you for watching this Rationalise TV presentation. If you're not already a member, we ask you please come and join us and show your support at rationalrise.tv. This is our very own independent, self-managed video streaming platform where we cannot be controlled by the thought police. We're doing it our own way, and we'd love you to come and join us from as little as $5 per month. If you've enjoyed my show and you'd like to support me in other ways, a great way to do that is to grab a copy of my book, The Ghost of Emily, or its sequel, The Ghost of Delacroix. Both of them are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Booktopia, and all the rest. And not only available in paperback, but in gorgeous hardcover too, for the people who want to keep archive quality long-term books on their bookshelf like I do. So please grab a copy of one of my books. They're excellent, adventurous science fiction laced with philosophy, religion, family, men of the West, war, violence, guns, all the things that we like to talk about here on the James Fox Higgins Show. And of course, you can join us as well at our new social network, championsofthelight.com. This is a brand new platform. We're still getting started, but we would love for you to come and request to join. And gradually, we're going to be inviting people in to create an awesome community of like minds to share these ideas and to celebrate all of the beauty and the culture and the history of the European peoples, as well as to uplift and support the future of Western Christendom. Thanks again. I'm James Fox Higgins, and I'll see you next time.